It's the VeggieTales, God made you special and he loves you very much.
Sometimes pulling back and letting your message exist within the subtext is actually more effective.
Unless you're Spike Lee, at which point Spike Lee can have characters turn to the camera and go, what about that president, huh? I'm Matteo Guthrie. I've been a professional writer for a few years, and I've been making movies with Zack for a very long time.
My name is Zachary Koch. I've been a freelance filmmaker for a hot minute now, have experience in the commercial videography world, and also have made a lot of short films with this guy.
What is the goal of our film podcast?
The goal of your next film is to empower young filmmakers to become better at their craft and to be more intentional with the creative decisions that they make on set and in their creative life more broadly.
Couldn't have written it better myself.
I think you could have.
Maybe.
You did come up with the name after all.
I did come up with the name. So the topics for today are finding time for art when you're busy. And then our second topic is a little spicier, but how to handle your soapbox and your message within art. So without further ado, do you want to just jump into it?
Let's do it.
All right.
I'm ready.
So first topic. I feel that whenever we're making films as people who are not just employed to make art, but are, I'm employed as a writer and I work on projects, sometimes creative projects, but not my own. And I feel that oftentimes I'm busy and then I have social life and then, I have family life and then I have to take care of my cat, etc., etc. I get a little lost in actually putting in the work on creative projects. I feel like this is something that plagues a lot of filmmakers in our same sort of situation where things end up happening and they get in the way of actually making that movie, actually writing that script. And I feel that we have often fallen prey to the same sort of busyness. But at the same time, I feel like we've on our own perhaps been able to figure a way through that.
I think so. I think it's a time management problem in some respects. Obviously, you got to have good balance in life. You can't just make art every single second of every single day. You also have friends that you probably want to visit, family that you should visit. And finding that balance can be tough. But I think at the very least, starting from, okay, what's distracting me that's unnecessary? If you're like me and you are interested in a lot of forms of creativity, maybe being a little bit more specific about what you're going to focus on whenever you do have that time. That focus is really important. And so for me, I've had to kind of hone in on okay, I'm just making videos, I'm just making films. If I do too many other things, I'm just going to get distracted and I'm not going to get anywhere.
For me, it's less of a time management thing because I want to actually put in the time on said project. I'll just sit down and do it. And I'm going to really push through this. I find myself often in this space where oh yeah, I can sit down and find the time, but I'm just so busy that making time for it is less of an issue than just when I do sit down, not being completely exhausted.
That's tricky. So how do you navigate that?
For example, I've worked with a client that is a pretty high level luxury auto manufacturer. And I was doing creative work for them, and I found it very fulfilling. Obviously, within the corporate creative work, there are things that aren't as fulfilling as going out and making our own movies. But as far as writing and all of that, I found that really fulfilling. But then I would clock out, sit down, open up my script writing program, and I wouldn't even say burnt out. I was just so used up because I was so busy that I just couldn't. And I was I can find the time, but I'm just too busy to actually expend that energy.
So you've presented two problems. The first problem is finding the time to create in the first place. The second problem is, what do you do with that time when you're burnt out?
All the creative neurons they've clocked out. And now I sit down in front of the computer. I'm I don't want to do this. And I've really just found that, at least in writing, just getting something down, anything down, is better than nothing at all. Which is a little bit like our quick and dirty philosophy.
What I'm hearing you say is to push through, even though you're kind of mentally exhausted, to just try and get anything down that you possibly can?
Yeah, get anything down. For example, recently I haven't been actually too busy with work. I finish all my corporate trainings, I get everything down, and then I sit down to do my own stuff. And it's well, wouldn't I rather be catching up on television or whatever, because I'm just so burnt out creatively.
On one hand, it's important to make time for yourself. And in a lot of ways, that can fill you up and give you the energy that you need in order to be able to create at all. However, when it comes to the time management and work aspect of this, I'm viewing this from two different angles. The first angle is I work a creative job, so I'm burnt out on creative tasks for the day, even when I do have the time and do have the desire to make something. But I see that in that example, I see it as a problem of maybe you're being creatively fulfilled at work and you don't feel like you have to create something on your own. At least me working creative jobs, you clock out and you said, I did the creative thing that I meant to do today. It can sometimes feel like you already accomplished your creative obligations for the day. You took care of that creative impulse. On the other hand, if you're working a non-creative job, it can be difficult to get yourself into a creative mindset when you've spent your entire day working in a warehouse. I've worked warehouse jobs before and they're very mind-numbing. And it's difficult to break into that creative mindset. So I think the solution of just get anything down is a really good one, because if you're working that non-creative job, just lower the bar a little bit, say, just write something. And this is very much coming from a writer's perspective. And I think you can adapt this to other art forms as well. But it sounds like you're saying, get yourself into that creative mindset by lowering the bar a little bit and just saying, just get something done. On the other hand, you're kind of tricking yourself to be productive, because if you write just one creative sentence, you're more likely to write another sentence and another sentence. And so sometimes lowering the bar a little bit, you can clear it. And then you have that momentum of, okay, now I'm doing the thing. You get that momentum back. And then, you go from writing one sentence to writing a dozen. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, there is the kind of tricking yourself into being productive. For me specifically, before I was working creatively, professionally, I was working in audiovisual installation, which was a very fun job. I got to kind of travel around and see a lot of places, but I would come home after sometimes 11-hour days, 10-hour days. Rarely did I work just an 8-hour day, and I was too busy, right? And then I would come home and I'd have like a project to edit, and I didn't even want to sort the footage, and just having like, let me at least sort 2 things, let me sort 3 things. Having that foundation was good for me to just, let me just mark in and out for this scene, put it in the timeline, whatever.
Let me make my selects.
Yeah, let me make my selects.
Let me sync some audio.
Yeah, syncing audio. Just even for like one clip. And at least I felt like it was better than going home, sitting on the couch, and being like, oh, I've done nothing. I'm never going to do anything creatively because I'm just sitting here. It was almost Sisyphean, just kind of crawling up the mountain, but at least I was getting another toehold, another foothold, and I could just drag myself a little bit forward on that project.
So you're making progress.
Yeah.
Even though it might not seem like a lot that day in that moment.
Just writing that, 2 lines, editing 2 clips, sequencing your timeline, whatever you want to say. It's just a little something is better than nothing.
Absolutely.
And like sometimes it comes down to like, oh yeah, I have writer's block or whatever. And it's like, then that's a whole other conversation. But for specifically like being just too busy, it allows you to, even if something's on the back burner, not let it get cold.
I think we should challenge our audience to do one creative thing every single day, even if it's just writing one sentence, filming one shot.
I mean, from a production standpoint, it would be like, I think once a day might be stretching it, but maybe once every 2 weeks, get a little something in on your project. And obviously you have to have crew, you have to have cast. So filming just whatever project you're working on right now might not be that simple, but Peter Jackson, for example, I forget the title of his first film. Hold on. I'm going to look this up.
He's going to bother him
Pause.
if he does it.
All right. Peter Jackson's first film was called Bad Taste, and it took him forever to produce because I think he was working as a film developer. I think that was his job, but he was working a job that did not pay a lot. So he couldn't just lump sum this together, get it done, over whatever, a month or however long it would take. It took him years to just piece by piece shoot shots, save up enough money for film, shoot more. He saved his money, scrimped, and then over a period of months, he was able to slowly piece together this film over however many years it took him.
Now, I'm sure he did it for budgetary reasons. However, I think that approach to someone who's super busy, we don't have the same limitations nowadays, but that do it in pieces approach, I think can be really, really helpful for someone.
One of our early films together where we had to shoot, we're in college. A lot of our friends are also in college. They're going on vacation, etc. So we just kind of had to scrimp, and we shot it over the summer, which doesn't sound like much until you realize how short of a film it really is. With what we have now, we could probably shoot it in a weekend. We had one day completely wasted because we had cast members show up in costumes that were not what they were instructed to wear, and locations that just were not working.
This is why I'm very excited for Adobe's Firefly AI.
Just rid of
change
that.
The costume.
Change the whole costume. But in all seriousness, for the scale of project, we did it when we could, and we plotted forward. Bottom line,
do something creative every day.
Do something creative. Just keep plotting at it. And for as much as we espouse quick and dirty, sometimes it just has to be, it can't be quick. And you just have to do it little by little by little. And that's not a bad thing.
Well said.
Next topic?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Our next topic is the soapbox. How to find your message in art, which is...
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is a bit of a spicy one, especially as kind of younger filmmakers. We don't have a lot of studio interference. None, actually. No studios are interfering in these projects, which gives us both a very open playing field as far as topics, but also we don't have the guidelines that a lot of studios do give their creators. How do you see filmmakers incorporating agendas, their message into film that is both impactful to what they're trying to say without feeling like they're soapboxing or preaching at you? And how do you feel as the kind of nebulous, not quite studio young independent filmmakers balancing that with often the responsibility to deliver messages?
Well, where to even start with that? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
The way you frame the question with starting with the studio interference aspect and then, presenting this question to people who don't have that interference, and then in theory, they can just make films about whatever they want. I want to suggest that maybe the studio interference isn't a bad thing. And maybe, even though we don't have studio interference, I am that studio interference for you.
Sometimes.
Now, I think generally we're very much on the same page with the messaging of our films. I think having someone that kind of keeps you in check a little bit is kind of good. I think having a creative partner is like a really good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because back to the colleagues thing, Colleagues on a Trial Basis, which was our 2018 film. You wanted that to be a feature film.
Well, there was a feature film with all the characters from Colleagues that I had said, hey, I want to make this. Do you want to do a feature? I just wrote this, and I'd done actually quite a few revisions to it to make it filmable. And you said, that's a bad idea. And I said, well, what if we put this on the back burner and we do like almost a prequel of sorts? And so I wrote a short film for that. And that was taxing enough to almost make me pass out from stress a few times. And then I was like, oh, okay, it's good that I didn't make a feature out of this.
My point there being, having a creative partner to kind of keep you in check, I think is a really good thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you keep me in check a lot too, because especially with the gear thing, go see our last episode, I can get really obsessed about the specifics. And then you say, that doesn't matter. Like, you can make decisions on set through the lens of a writer, and I'm making decisions through the lens of what's going to be a little bit prettier. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not. And so you keep me in check in a variety of different ways. And I would like to think I sometimes do the same, at least historically for you.
Yeah. Historically, you have been the voice of reason to some of my flightier filmmaking decisions.
I will say that there is an element of saying, that idea scares me, Matteo, but let's figure out how to do it. There's something to be said about that. And it's a balance, like with everything. But my point in bringing it back to the studio interference thing, we're talking more technical. Hey, don't do this. Yeah. Don't make a feature, make a short. Hey, don't worry about the lighting so much. It looks fine already.
Yeah.
But I think you can apply that to the messaging of your films too. Maybe running your scripts and your ideas that might be a little bit too soapboxy by your creative partner. And your creative partner can say, hey, maybe you're preaching at the audience too much. Focus on the execution of the story or of the film. Having that creative partner to kind of rein you in a little bit, I don't think is such a bad thing.
No, it's not. And like Zack I call Zack affectionately my no man. He'll poke at my scripts and make me either justify it or say like, why is this thing here? And I will say, oh, well, I don't actually need this thing there. This is purely a vanity thing. I don't think it's ever really hit messaging so much for me, just because our films focus on things other than political discourses. They're often much more simple concepts that we're really tackling in our movies. But Zack will also often be the one to poke at, like, why is this scene in here? Why did you write this? Is this dialogue necessary? Is this character necessary? And if you have a creative partner, especially if you're making a film with political, or I'll even just say kind of moral content, having somebody to ask, does this need to be in here, and does this help the art we're making, is definitely helpful. If I do have a message I want to put in there, and usually like, for example, for Bleeding Heart Routine, which is our short film we had in festivals recently, the message was like basically love and optimism, which is a very complicated message already. There are ways of talking about that optimism rather than having the main character turn to the camera and go, hey, I know it sucks, guys, but you can just keep going. Like that feels like you're being preached at. You know, it's the VeggieTales, God made you special and he loves you very much. But within modern filmmaking, inserting that message, be it, you know, optimism or whatever, into the subtext of the film is really the only way to go, unless you're Spike Lee, at which point Spike Lee can have characters turn to the camera and go, man, what about that president, huh? And it's like, well, you're Spike Lee, so you get a pass.
He's kind of earned that right.
Spike Lee has made films that will be better than anything I could ever dream of writing. And therefore, Spike Lee gets to break some rules. But as filmmakers, there are social causes that we really do want to speak to, and we want to advocate for these people, and we want to make statements about society. And I feel that there are ways to do that that don't ignore the fact that film is an art form and not a propaganda medium, and that you really do have to layer those messages, no matter how positive they are or how whatever you want to say about them. You need to layer those messages into the story and make them move with the story, rather than having the audience stub their toe on what you're trying to say. But at the end of the day, this isn't to say that you should keep politics out of your art. You should keep commentary out of your art, because your art is there for that sort of thing. You're just supposed to put it in there eloquently and do a good job at it.
So to summarize your point, you're saying that it's absolutely okay to have a message. It's absolutely okay to have a soapbox.
And as independent filmmakers, we almost have a responsibility to tell stories that don't make it in the mainstream.
But you're saying just do it tastefully.
Do it well. That's really my point, is just do it well.
I think in a lot of films, you have the plot, which is one separate unit, from the messaging, which is the other unit. And sometimes they just don't click together, and it makes it feel like the messaging is just there to serve the whims of the person who made this thing, and the film would have been better without it.
I actually do have an example from
Really?
one of our films. It was a film we did called Somniac, which was one heck of a shoot. But within the script, there were certain parts of it that I was trying to deliver a specific message. And the film kind of went into, actually, funnily enough, sort of political, the way that the pharmaceutical industry had been pushing opioids. I felt the script was actually pretty subtle about it, where if you didn't think about it, it wasn't too on the nose.
It was still a monster in the house kind of film.
Yeah, it was a monster. It was a horror film. And the monster being thematically opioid dependency, and that theme went a little too on the nose for a couple scenes. And Zack definitely said, do we really need this? Because at this point, we're expending effort to say something that we've already said. And that was extremely helpful to me.
For sure.
Which I thought was very helpful.
I think the takeaway is to be confident in your messaging. Don't think that you have to oversell it, because more often than not, in our experience, we've kind of really been on that border of saying too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes pulling back a little bit and letting the film speak for itself and letting your message exist within the subtext is actually more effective.
Play your cards, right? Play your cards right. Don't overplay your hand. And as part of that, oftentimes, especially with people that disagree with you, who are often the people that need to hear your message in your art, you'll often hear them say, keep your politics out of my art, or keep your politics out of my movie. First of all, you get to make the art as you choose. Second of all, a lot of these people will go into films with politics they disagree with, and they'll say they need to like stop saying this so much. And it's not so much that they want, whatever your agenda is completely out. And it's more that they don't want this messaging crammed down their throat constantly. Even if it's just momentary, they will know they're being sold something.
I think the reason why people might not like to have messages crammed down their throats is because it's insulting to their intelligence. Because it's almost as if the writer or the director, in making a point over and over again, if the audience gets it, and then they're like, why are you telling me something I already know again? I'm smarter than you think I am. I think part of holding back a little bit and not overstating your message is to respect your audience and respect their intelligence and that they get it, but also to respect their interpretation.
Yeah, so I mean, some of them could have, for example, Starship Troopers, which with the Helldivers video game is very popular right now. Starship Troopers is very on the nose satire, but at the same time, some people have completely, at least textually incorrect interpretations of the film. It's Paul Verhoeven. He did, for example, RoboCop. RoboCop has a message. It has a very salient political message, I feel. And it's not necessarily hidden, but it's so well done and it's not, again, overstated that even though talking about police corruption as it does, like, it's not hard to tell. You don't have to go into like a close reading of the text. You know what it says. Even people that disagree with it about police corruption still have to acknowledge that it's a good film and it tells its story well.
I think part of doing messaging right is respecting the medium itself, because filmmaking is an entertainment medium. You don't go to the cinema for the message. You go to the cinema for the entertainment. And so if the products that you're watching is all message and it sacrifices on the entertainment, or it forgets that it needs to also be entertaining, that can be a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Respect the medium and respect the fact, especially if you're a filmmaker, that this is an entertainment medium, and don't let your opinions and your messaging get in the way of that goal.
I would go a step further to say that as an indie filmmaker, you have the ability that a Marvel blockbuster director doesn't have to put out a film that really says something. And you should not pass that up just because you're afraid of talking too much about politics or whatever you wish to say, because you are inherently less marketable than the latest franchise film, and therefore you can go into less marketable topics, and that's a good thing. That said, don't let your focus on the message obliterate making a good movie. Even if I disagree with whatever you're trying to say, maybe I don't like the happiness. Maybe I think we should be less happy. Whatever it is, I will respect you for making good art, even if I don't like what you're saying.
That was good.
All right, that's it.
Well, let's do an outro.
This has been Your Next Film. I'm your host, Matteo Guthrie.
And I am your other host, Zachary Koch.
Hit the bell. We appreciate you sharing your time with us. We hope you found something edifying from this, something valuable. Tune in for more.
And go ahead and leave a comment on what it is you're going to work on today.
Leave a comment on the best film you've ever made. Leave a comment on the worst film you've ever made. Leave a comment on how you learned from the worst film you've ever made.
Just leave a comment, please.